Mrs. Melanchuk was briefly sharing her screen, so I know that she is there. And it is now 6 o'clock, so I will welcome everyone who is attending. Good evening. Welcome to the first of two scheduled municipal budget presentations. The intent of these presentations is the same as it has been in previous years. That is, this is an opportunity for administration to present to council and to the public a proposed budget. Council, as in any meeting, may ask questions to presenters to better understand and clarify the proposal. The intent of these sessions is to inform council and of course the public in preparation for further debate among councillors. The intent is not to enter into debate with administration. These presentations are proposals brought forward by administration for deliberation and ultimately for decision by council. And in that regard, council will be informed by these sessions and by further input from the public, which is most certainly encouraged. In that respect, though, the presentation format differs somewhat from previous years. Normally, these public presentations occur in person in council chambers. A small number of residents, probably at most 6 on average, typically attend those presentations. And at the conclusion of presentations, I have in the past permitted questions and comments from community members. A very manageable practice in that setting. This year, however, is not normal. There is no opportunity for in-person presentations or for public attendance. We're all still learning to manage in this new virtual world, and we anticipate and are certainly hopeful that there will be broad interest among residents to live stream these presentations. But managing live input from a large audience in a virtual atmosphere is challenging and perhaps beyond my technological capabilities at this time. So we invite anyone watching this evening or on Wednesday evening to please email any questions, comments, or observations to info@town.jasper.ab.ca. And as with our regular council and committee of the whole meetings, these presentations will be recorded and uploaded to our YouTube channel. For those who watch those proceedings in that format, we also encourage you to submit questions, comments, or observations to that same site, info@town.jasper.ab.ca. And to allow sufficient time for all who are interested in contributing to the process, we will receive community input until end of day, Sunday, November 29th. Responses to your questions will be provided as early as possible during the ensuing week, and both the questions and the answers will be posted on our website. Administration will compile all questions and answers for inclusion in the agenda package for our meeting on December 8th, which agenda package will be available on our website on Friday, December 4th. And if for any reasons answers to questions are not available, that also will be noted. We are confident that with the enhanced opportunity for more of our residents to view these presentations either live or by recording, and the extended time for submissions of questions, it will lead to greater public engagement in the process. So we do look forward to your questions over time and as late as Sunday of this coming week. And with that, I will turn it over to our Director of Finance and Administration, who will lay out the program for this evening, introduce the presentations, and begin with the presentation of budget considerations for the Department of Finance and Administration. So Mrs. Melanchuk, I turn it to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, very well, thank you.
Good evening, Council and members of the public. So tonight, we as administration are presenting the upcoming 2020 budget. So tonight you'll first hear an introduction from myself about the budget going into the next year, as well as from Greg Van Tegum from Protective Services and Yvonne McNabb for Culture and Recreation. There will also be at the end of the slides, I'll leave up the email link, and you can also find it on our website at any time if you wish to inquire about the budget process or any questions about the budget itself. So we've had a couple meetings already where we've had municipal requests come through to council. So we've seen some presentations from the Jasper Yellowhead Museum and Archives, as well as Habitat in the Arts. And then we've also heard from the Library Board, Jasper Victim Services, and tomorrow from the Jasper Skate Park. So tonight is our first special meeting going over the budget, and then our second night to go over community and family services, as well as operations and utilities, is on November 25th. That's this upcoming Wednesday. Then we'll also be in council on December 3rd for request for decision on either the interim or operating budget itself and the capital budget, as well as discussions to occur on December 10th meeting and December 15th as well. So lots of meetings to follow suit and lots of discussions to be had. As you can see, this is our Jasper National Park attendance for the past many years, from 1930 actually. So Jasper has experienced record numbers of visitors over the past few years since this 1930 record began. A heavy demand on municipal services creates enormous challenges for staff to maintain appropriate standards in the garbage collection, in recycling, water provision, sewer collection, bylaw enforcement, emergency response, and other municipal services. As you know, Jasper has a population at less than 5,000 residents and hosts close to 2.5 million visitors a year. This year, given our COVID situation, Jasper Park has given us some stats that indicate that we have had 1.5 million still in our little town this year. So that's from January until September. And that's without 2 months recorded, as there was no data being collected at the gates for those 2 months. But I'm sure that there were still some people coming through. The municipal services and facilities have been intentionally oversized to accommodate visitor demand and are paid primarily by the property tax holders. Recent years revealed that those oversized facilities are suffering the effect of aging and overuse and are in need of major refurbishment or replacement. The proposed 2021 operating and capital budgets reflect these harsh realities. While going over this budget presentation, administration tries to be as clear as possible so that anyone can understand this budget process. I apologize if some of you have heard some of this before. However, it is our goal that everyone is in attendance, understands the process and any concepts over the next few meetings that are had. The plan will be introduced each night with the budget, and then we will explain the content and then also move on to each department individually to go over their operating and capital requests. On this slide, you can see that we talk about assessment. An assessment is assigning a dollar value to a property for taxation purposes. I will sometimes make reference to a tax dollar amount per $100,000 of residential assessment, or say $1 million of a commercial assessment. So that might be referenced a few times and is also referenced in the documents that are online. Any new assessment growth is had when the new development permits that Parks receives from people doing any kind of renovations or building within the community cause new assessed values, creating a broader base for taxes to be spread. This year, we did not see as much as in prior years. However, there still is some. However, there are lots of changes in the assessment values going ahead. I was just given the preliminary numbers actually this week. So unfortunately, I was not able to dive in and give any kind of projections on what the assessment is trending towards for the next year. However, I probably will be able to get to this fairly soon in the next coming weeks. Going forward, just as a note, so that anyone could calculate for themselves, 1% of taxation increase is equal to $79,820 as compared to 2019. A lot of the budget discussions that we will be talking about, we compare to the 2019 year, as it was our last year to compare to that with a normal year. And looking at it, say you were looking at it from a perspective of the 2020 budget, it would be $70,000 for that 1%. Components of a tax rate. So you can see here, there's a municipal levy. So this municipal levy is used to fund the town services. So anything from culture and rec, your community, family and services, administration, as well as operations and protective services. I think that I forgot to say protective services. So that levy is anything that we collect is the expenses less any kind of revenue that we would receive from, say, ratepayers for any kind of usage. So the revenue, say, collected for using the gym or going to the activity center or any kind of revenue that we'll talk about later on. Now, the municipality also collects taxes for the school. So this is then collected from the municipality by the province. So that is a requisition that is not under our control. And then there is the Evergreen Foundation. And this is collected for operating and capital needs of the seniors' housing. So that is our rate of taxation. This year, we're talking about a municipal levy of $8,429,762. The school requisition is estimated at $4,903,213. And the Evergreen operating and capital combined is estimated at $677,927. Again, keep in mind that those are all estimated numbers at this point, and we usually find out more clearer numbers closer to the end of the year. So also included in the municipal taxation is rural policing. So in the 2021 year, we have been given a budget that we would have to collect $189,540. Also in that municipal's levy is Parks Canada Land Rent and Planning. That amount is $683,241. So if you go back and you look at the school requisition, the Evergreens requisition, and you combine also the policing, the rural policing, as well as Parks Canada Rent and Planning, this altogether represents 32% of the entire tax base budget. This slide is just a little reminder of our annual cycle for the budget. So honestly, we are continually, as administration, working on the budget process. It does not stop. It's a continual plan. It's a continual assessment, and we are always looking at it to ensure that we are keeping track of the municipal finances as closely as possible. So as early as January, we start with another audit, and we start planning the next year again in June, July, even August, and then here we are presenting to public in November. And we did try to do it a little bit earlier this year, but due to the restraints of COVID, we ended up having to push it back a bit further. So that's why we're presenting a little bit later in November again this year. Okay, so the operating budget, there's a base and a growth. The base is a foundation that maintains the council approved service standards and also meets statutory or regulatory requirements. This is referred to as a prior year budget for interim budget approval purposes. The growth is, for instance, new operating programs, recommended changes to service, and changes in overall expenses. Changes to the base budget would be considered a tax requirement and would ultimately affect the tax rate and result in growth. Here you can see an overall base summary of changes. So we've had a few things that we've been already talking about in council meetings, and you can see that overall we've had some changes in salaries and benefits. And going forward, there was a communications position that was approved in 2020, which will move into the 2021 year. So that ultimately affects the budget going forward. There's non-discretionary costs that incur, and we cannot control these at all. So for instance, utilities is going up 110,000. Insurance is going up 16,000 in the tax side of things. And as I'm talking about this, we're talking about the tax rate budget. There's recreation debt and transfer to reserves. There's a change in that area, about 98,000. And then there's also a projected decrease in revenue that we're anticipating seeing in the recreation area. And there's also emergency management, emergency social services. These are two areas where we had started funding these programs in 2020. So it wasn't seen in the 2019 year. So therefore, as comparing it to the 2019 year, you will see that change going forward as a request to continue those programs. And also on the table for discussion will be bylaw staffing transitions and external requisitions or requests that came from the municipality, the library, Jasper Artist Guild, Habitat, as well as the skateboard park, and that's a capital request. So. And then also what we might be discussing is additional growth, and this is based on individual requirements of each department. So you'll see some changes requested and talked about in finance and administration, as well as community and family services, culture and recreation, operations, and protective services. Now, these amounts are subject to further discussion. However, we will still have them on the table, and because they are needs for the community going forward as projected by the directors. These two charts illustrate the 2021 potential property taxes for residential and commercial properties. So this is where I said that I might be talking more about the assessed value in that 100,000 range, and even in the million range for the urban commercial properties. So the 2021 tax increases are listed, and then you can also see the annual tax increase for that area. So you could take, you know, if your property was worth 600,000, say you would take the 100,000 and the annual tax increase, multiply that by 6, and you'll see that's the number you'll see increase on your tax notices should it get passed as we are discussing it this evening. But as the mayor has alluded to, we have lots of discussions to occur. So these are just preliminary numbers going forward. There's nothing set. It's just to give a little bit of an idea of where we're going with these discussions. Again, you'll hear me reference a lot about the tax-based budget as well as the utility-based budget. So the tax-based budget covers all municipal operations. we're not allowed to operate in a deficit. So the difference is the annual, so we have an annual expenditure, and then we have our other revenues that we collect. Whatever the difference is that of those two numbers is what we have to levy for property taxation. In a utility-based budget, the delivery of the services are for water, sewer, garbage, and recycling. And they are covered under this, as well as funding capital in those utility related areas. Water, sewer, solid waste, and recycle programs support Jasper's ability to provide clean, safe drinking water to its residents. And it also, these funds will also go towards water and protect the natural environment through waste and wastewater treatment, solid waste and recycling management. So this fund is also balanced to zero, and they are all collected by user fees. The levy is collected by user fees only. So in the municipal world, we have revenue and expenses that I said I'd talk more about. So you can see that even some revenue that we might classify would be, say, some grants. Other levels of government might give these to us, and we would be directed by those requirements of each grant. We have sales and user fees, for example, recreation facility drop-in memberships, rentals of facilities and sport fields, etc. Fines and penalties, so from bylaws or penalties on late payments of taxes. For instance, other revenues, could be donations, for example. There's licensing and permits, so business licenses, dog, cats, permits as well. And we have franchise fees, so ATCO natural gas and electricity, percentage of ATCO's cost for delivering the commodity that is approved by council every 10 years. We have interests from our bank, transfer from reserves that are budgeted to offset one-time operating for repair, maintenance, and replacement expenditures. And then property, I can't see all my screens here. Our property taxes are mill rates levied on assessed values or property to recover the cost of running the municipality. So again, that expense less the revenues that we've just talked about equals the tax requirement. For expenses, you'll see salaries and wages and benefits. So the primary responsibility to provide these services to the citizen. And this includes also categories that we might look at are cost of living, market adjustment increases, pension, employment insurance, healthcare costs. It is the largest expense that communities bear. There's contracted and general services, so anything from janitorial to audit, legal, engineering, communications, insurance, electricity, natural gas, to name a few. There's materials, goods, and supplies like sand, salt, gravel, chemicals, general office and operating supplies. The municipality has payments on principal and interest on debentures and transfers to external groups that we talked about with the library, museum, victim services, JAG, Habitat, and transfers to reserves. So those will, it's like a savings account for any upcoming operating and capital projects going forward. So that's typically what you will see in a municipal budget. There are many non-discretionary costs that the municipality has, and we've already talked about some of those, like electricity and gas and insurance, phone, internet, all things that even people see in their daily households every year. In 2021, we do see another increase in insurance and utility rates. Municipal tax increases are frequently compared to CPI. So, however, this is a price of a basket of goods that a municipality would not frequently purchase. For example, what's in CPI is normally a comparison of food and shelter, transportation, healthcare, clothing, recreation, and none of these are typical municipal purchases. So what we will be talking about are MPI, so municipal spending patterns that are very different. Municipal Price Index is what it stands for. We continue to build new infrastructure. There's sidewalks, facilities, streetscaping. In addition, Jasper is committed to increasing capital spending to sustain the levels to ensure long-term sustainability of our infrastructure. We must pay due diligence to ensure assets are appropriately maintained to support the current community and the future generations. So we also have a capital budget, and each department other than community and family services will be going over their capital requirements for the next year as well. So this has anything to do with, say, larger items that we hold for a long time. So buildings, vehicles, machinery and equipment, parks, engineered structures. So say your roads and water mains and sewer lines, to name a few. This budget is important for critical maintenance existing infrastructure and future growth. Jasper divides its capital into two categories. There's repair, maintain, and replace. So this is an operational betterment, replacement, or rehab of the capital listed items. In our process, we list them on the capital budget, but we also see the transfer through the operating budget as well. So you might hear us talk about RMR, transfers for reserves, and that's what it's about. It's the capital projects that we have to, that hold a operational nature to them in repair and maintenance and replacement. And there's also growth. So this is to meet new future demands, new facilities, say when we got the new library, for instance, equipment, technology, infrastructure for development of and strengthening of the community. And again, there is a municipal portion of taxes that go to capital, and there's also a utility portion that goes to the capital. So there's transfers of reserves in both of those areas to support the capital budgets throughout the operating budget. Value for service. So often taxpayers will wonder whether they receive good value for services provided, because it's not clear of what is exactly provided. It's helpful to know that a lot of our services are available 24/7. Employees are often on call for emergencies like fires and accidents, blocked drains, pump failures, alarms, pandemics. Who would have thought? It's also helpful to know that the actual costs of running our municipality. So to give you an example, average costs, these are, approximate costs for insuring our fleets and assets, for example, is $200,000 a year. Our gas and electricity for 1 year sits around $1 million. To buy an emergency vehicle is $750,000 and a 2-year process. And to resurface 1 kilometer of road is about 1.6 million. And then also, if you're doing the sidewalks alongside of that, another 900,000. So it's a lot of money that the municipality has to deal with annually. This graph represents taxes paid at the new proposed rate annually per 100,000 of assessed property value. So therefore, a house valued at, say, 700,000 would pay annually $497 for operations, $189 for protective services, $105 for CFS, $511 for culture and recreation, $7 for the Jasper Community Housing Corporation, $273 for administration, and $133 for legislative. So that breaks down to about $1,715 per year. Again, you have to remember that we're talking about the municipal portion of our taxes. A lot of people will say, well, I pay a lot more taxes than that annually. You have to remember that there's still included all of that, the Evergreens Foundation, as well as the Alberta school tax. So just keep that in your mind going forward. So this is another graph to go over monthly municipal service versus, say, an average household expense. So this is based on a family of 4 and in a single family dwelling, assessed at about $750,000. So the purple lines are the average household items that you would see, like gas and electricity and your phone and internet, your cell phone, say a movie for your family of 4, and a $2 coffee a day, compared to what you pay monthly for your sewer, for your water, that are necessities, for your garbage, all the way down to the Jasper community housing. So it's just an interesting way to look at some of the expenses that are incurred in a monthly environment in a household. As we dive into this budget conversation, we must draw attention to the need to focus on future asset management. It's going to be talked about quite a bit during the presentations over the next 2 nights and in meetings following this as well. It is a process that has been neglected and proves to be frightening as the infrastructure ages. It's not only us; all communities are dealing with this. We have gained a lot of assets that now are aging, and we have to deal with this. There is always a process of debenture, but we should also pay special attention to saving for the assets we own, maintain, and provide a service to our residents. They also draw visitation to our community. Our most recent study for asset management was done 3 years ago. It draws attention to what the replacement cost of our infrastructure was at that time, $269 million, and that is larger now. In that study, it was said that the average capital budget allocation for up to and including 2017 was $2.5 million annually. The capital renewal needs based on that report says that we should be doing about $7 million annually. In 2018 and 19, the capital additions were 6.6 million, so 3.3 million each year around. So we are doing a bit better at getting closer to that annual number, not very steps and little steps. Also, another thing to consider is that on an average, our reserve contributions have been only about 1.5 million a year. The asset management discussions will occur as we go over recreations facilities mostly, as well as operations and utilities going into the next year. So that's it for the introduction. Now I'll go into just the finance and administration part of the budget. So to give an overview of what we'll be talking about throughout the next 2 evenings, we are looking at an increase of municipal taxation over and above the 2019 year by $447,837. Some things, again, keep in mind that there's requisitions in there, but they are offset, so they're revenues as well as expenses that you'll see in the budget. There was also a Parks Canada rent relief in 2020 due to the COVID response. Therefore, that has been factored into this budget because they didn't requisition the full amount. So we can, after given the approval from council, I will be bringing a request for decision to council to set aside those funds to offset some of the costs going into the 2021 year. So that's good. And there's significant, well, just to highlight some of the significant changes by department branch. Again, I'd already said something about this earlier, but, or not quite yet, sorry, the legislative, there's increases in salary and benefits, but there's decreases in many contracted services and materials, goods, and supplies trending to 2019. So that's where we get those numbers of a net change of $19,181. And in general administration, there's a change of $24,102. There was a $44,000 increase in salaries and benefits. However, we were able to offset by many decreases to supplies, as well as training and travel. And we also were able to recognize some additional revenue. In communications, you see that there's also an increase of $63,626. And this is for the communication position that I alluded to earlier. It was approved in 2020 going forward. The positions actually sits at more like 67,000, but however, it was offset with other decreases in travel and contracted services, as well as material goods and supplies going forward. So that's just a high level summary of where administration and finance sits with their budgets. And overall, it is still sitting at a net decrease. And that is mainly due because of the Parks Canada rent relief that you see occurring and rolling over into the 2021 year. So that ultimately affects the taxes by decreasing it by 1.15% going forward. Earlier, I had also spoke to requests that might additionally help going forward. And this is just above and beyond the initial number of talking about the 2019 plus non-discretionary costs. Administration and finance is looking to also potentially allocate another $7,500 to IT reserves, something that we should be looking at and setting ourselves up for. Given what we've seen, especially this year with COVID response, it's really important that our IT software and hardware are up to speed and ready to go. And also in general administration, the other 7,500 is just general increases over many line items. So that's it for administration. Now, a year of success. I must say it was a hard one to reflect on because of COVID. We don't generally think of much success in a year of trial and tribulation, but the municipality did see some good things happen. So there were some grant fundings received. There was federal gas tax as usual, municipal sustainability initiative monies that were still received, ICIP that was talked about for the rec center renovation that was received, MSP that was a response to COVID, and also the MOST grant, which was a response to COVID as well. And ID12 was also supportive to the municipality this year in supporting the S Block parking lot and wayfinding signage. As a department also, we were able to improve our online initiatives and efficiencies with EFT payables. So it's still a work in progress, getting everybody signed up and going forward, but we're trying to assist this paperless workflow as much as possible. And as everyone has seen this year, it's very important that we live in this computer world now. It's been heavily relied on in the past 8 months. And our COVID response, we feel that it's been very efficient. We've moved quickly, swiftly, and promptly on all COVID responses, and feel that it's been a good response given the situation that we've had to deal with. And we've also been working on the utility rate composition. Now, I know that there's been a lot of questions about the MOST grant funding. So this is a contribution to us from the federal government as well as the provincial government. And we received a large sum of money, mainly due to the impact that we see as a tourist community. So this was very well received by the municipality. There's been a lot of questions about this grant and how it will pan out work going forward and how it will assist in the next year. And I've had some conversations with grant advisors, and we've got a lot of good news, and it looks like we will be able to allocate and report on the full amount with our projections going forward. So we've done some studies, we've done some analyzing of where we're sitting, and it does look like the 3.3 million we will be able to allocate it. Now, some things that the MOST grant will cover is, for instance, even the 2020 COVID response tax reduction, any loss of revenue. So say any kind of closures and loss of revenue, say in our rec facilities or daycare, whatnot. Additional expenses incurred because of COVID, and also capital COVID needs. So for instance, their automatic doors or touchless garbage cans in the central business district and whatnot. So that being said, there's lots of ways for us to use this money going forward. And there's more conversations to have with council regarding on which direction they would like to proceed in how to use the money going into the next year. So there is a good situation going forward with this amount that was allocated to us, and we're very happy to receive. So some upcoming initiatives for us. We have been always tasked with finding alternative sources of revenue. So there have been some discussions on paid parking, and it was suggested that we do talk about this during the budget process from council. So we will bring up a short little bit about paid parking, I think in the next slide actually. And then going forward into next year, I would like to work more on the reserves and budget policies, the utility rate bylaw, which is coming soon, and more on the electronic fund transfer side on our receivables. So also to work on that paperless workflow, and continuing to move forward with the housing initiatives that have been set in council's strategic priorities. So to speak more to the paid parking discussions, because it could ultimately assist the budget in the new year, there was an initial preliminary budget drawn up, and we could potentially look at if given the situation of basing it on $1 per hour at 50% capacity of our parking spots, we could be looking at $1.1 million revenue. Now, there are expenses that have to be incurred. For instance, there is signage, there are transaction fees, there would have to be staff expenses, whatnot. So after those are incurred, we would only be looking at about $180,000 to $200,000 in expenses for one option that we were looking at in paid parking discussions. That could bring us close to $925,000 a year. So this hasn't been built into the budget as of yet, because there's more conversations to be had around the situation, whether or not council wants to proceed with this alternate source of revenue. However, roads are a tax-based budget that has no additional revenue that supports it or offsets it. So this is an option. Now, like I said before, thinking about the infrastructure that's underneath of it, aging, it's 50, 60 years old, then the roads need to be replaced. It's an expensive thing that needs to occur. Now, we could be either looking at reserves or tax offsets with this additional revenue, or even both going forward. So there's some more conversations to be had around the paid parking, but I know that council was interested in hearing the impact that it could potentially have on the budget going into the next year, or potentially, if not next year, another year in the future. So that was just a quick overview of where we could sit in that financial state. And for administration on the capital requests, to go over it quite well, try to do it as quickly as possible. There's an office meeting space design and construction admin portion. Now, anything that you see going forward in any of the capital requests that is bold means that it was discussed in 2020. It might have been, it was part of the 2020 capital project submitted, but then was removed due to the pandemic. And so anything that you see that is not bold, then that is part of the 2021 capital request going forward. But bolded means that it was talked about before. Now this is the admin portion of the office and meeting space that would also be part and parcel of the renovation that would occur with the rec center and covered under the ICIP, as well as the MSIC program. So there's a lot of office space. For instance, we even have, you can see the bottom right photo, that's an office that is in the old gym that's downstairs, so no windows, and just was constructed in the meantime for our IT staff. So there we had to make makeshift kind of a room for him because there's no space. And then there's also another space that's sits off of a very crowded and loud space. So we're just running out of space generally with our office and meeting spaces. Another request going forward is called Virtual City Hall. Excuse me, I'm just getting a bit dry. This is a software module that is available from the Diamond software, so our financial software. It is an interface hosted on our website that would enable residents to view, say, their utility invoices or their tax invoices, business licenses, animal license, and receivables. And this would encourage customers to have their bills sent electronically. We're trying to do the paperless flow. It would also enable customers to pay bylaw tickets online. Now, this is a system that's used by Banff and is well received. And because people know it from Banff, it would already be accustomed to by many visitors that had to use it in Banff. Currently, if a person is issued a ticket, they would have to physically come to the office to pay or pay over the phone with a credit card. Canadian offense tickets can be paid online through their bank. However, we've seen some problems with this in the past, so we would like to go to this online platform to provide the service for all clients. And asset management software. So this is, as we've spoken about, asset management. We've had the study. We know where we have to move forward with this, but we don't really have the software to integrate everything that we need to move forward with. So when an asset management plan is established, a first step to implement that plan is to create a system inventory and to build an asset registry. To face management, financial, engineering, and other challenges, we must know what our physical assets are. We know what they are, but to have them within the system and it logs where their location and whatnot. We must implement a practical guide in asset management and practice best management practices. And the other requests going forward are all IT. So license upgrade and audit. staff security training, as well as some network infrastructure upgrades. So that would result in an additional $45,000 for on the IT side. So very simple with licensing and then training for our staff to avoid any kind of attackers. Now we're finding that government organizations are the primary target for attackers. And most of our emails and email addresses are listed on our website. So it's just giving our staff the appropriate training going forward to avoid potential problems. And network infrastructure upgrades is very, it's about our network switches. They have come to the end of their useful life, and they need to be replaced. And we need to rewire them so that there's unnecessary points of failure within them and whatnot. So it's all about having that IT set up going forward as well within our capital requests. And very last but not least, there is a section on housing, and I might at this point call on Mr. Greathead to speak to the Jasper community housing projects and parcel servicing, and as well as then Mr. Hutton to speak to the cottage clinic interior and exterior repairs.
Tash, are you able to stop your screen share, please?
Yes, sorry, just one moment, please. I can't find the toolbar. For some reason. Oh, there it is. It was hidden. There you go.
Good evening, Your Worship and Council. Regarding the servicing requirement for the GA, GB, GC lots on Connaught, there's no developed utilities on those sites. So this is an initiative that needs to be done before we are able to develop these parcels of land. So this request is $200,000, and that's just to do the infrastructure studies, and that will look into the requirements for fire flow and looping requirements for the water system, the sewer collection system, and stormwater management systems. So that's all that is going to be entailed on those, as well as your just your general sight lines and road approaches and such. So that's what this request is for.
Mr. Hutton, can you now speak to the cottage clinic interior and exterior repairs?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Natasha. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so the proposal here is to dedicate $30,000 just to general repair and upgrades in the facility. That would include a full interior wall patching and painting, and then addressing exterior finishes, repainting, siding, and trim, rebuilding some of the railings in front of the facility, just a general upkeep, nothing particularly fancy or noticeable, but definitely a time to do it before we get too deteriorated on the interior or exterior finishes.
Thank you, Mr. Hutton. And that concludes our introduction, as well as administration's and finances budget, and now we might be able to have a question and answer through council if you wish.
Thank you, Mrs. Melanchuk and Mr. Greathead and Mr. Hutton. Very well done. You've given us a few extra minutes for questions, and that's appreciated. For the benefit of council, just be clear that you're quite welcome to ask questions either about the introduction or the specifics of the finance and administration particulars for the coming budget. Just to get us started, I wanted to ask one simple question. Mrs. Melanchuk, the presentation that we have just seen, the slideshow, is that or will that be something that is available publicly on our website?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
And also through the YouTube video.
Yes, thank you. I was just thinking more about a document that one could go to and scroll back and forth through the slideshow rather than watching a presentation on YouTube. I hadn't yet found it, but it may already be there and I couldn't locate it. In any event, I appreciate that it will be. I will turn it open to councillors, and I see Councillor Demota with his hand up.
Well, I just wanted to congratulate you on that presentation, Ms. Malinchuk. And having said, listening to what the mayor stated, I think it would be really beneficial for that intro clip if you could do a voiceover and just have like a short video on our website. So when people do have questions about tax dollars and how assessment works and all that stuff, it'd be really handy to have that link. I know we have the video, and I don't want to add more work to you, but that was so well described, and you know, it gets better every year. So I thought that was great. Congratulations on that. And yeah, the information that you provided for us was very well done. So I was appreciative of that delivery. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions from councillors? In the absence, there I see Councillor Butler. I can come back to my question later. Councillor Butler, go ahead.
Sure. Thank you very much, Your Worship, and thank you very much, Mrs. Melanchuk and Mr. Greathead and Mr. Hutton. Your Worship, I'm not sure what your protocol is going to be. Sorry, I lost my video for a moment. I have a few questions. I don't want to take up more than my piece of time, so stop me if somebody else has some questions. Mrs. Melanchuk, you had a slide where you referenced both the, I think, sort of repair and maintenance portion of the capital budget, and then also what you referred to as the growth portion of the capital budget. And I'm trying to remember the slide because my recollection is that you said the repair and replacement portion of the capital budget is funded through transfers from the operating budget to reserves, which I understand. But you made the distinction that that is how the repair and I can't remember your term for that portion of the capital budget, how that is funded, and you distinguish that from the growth portion. But I thought all capital budget was funded through transfers from the operating budget to reserves. So I'm a little confused about that. Could you help me to understand that?
Sure. So capital projects are either covered by reserves or grant funding or debenture. And when we're talking about reserves covering the capital project within, I don't know if I fully understand, I guess, your question with you allude to growth. I can probably find the slide again, but it's hard to share and have the conversations.
Well, maybe I can be more clear, and I'm sorry, I know I wasn't that clear, but you divided the capital budget into two portions. One you termed growth and one you termed, and that's the part I don't remember. You called it
RMR, repair,
RMR.
maintenance, replacement.
Thank you very much. So you pointed out that the RMR portion of the budget is funded from transfers into reserves from the operating budget, and you distinguish that from the growth portion, which I understand you are therefore saying that that portion, the growth portion of the capital budget, is not funded from transfer to reserves. But in terms of tax-based funding, I thought all of our input into the capital budget was channeled through reserves, that we see all of those transfers coming out of our annual operating budget and into capital reserves. So is that the case only with the RMR portion of the budget, or is it of the capital budget, or is it also the case with the growth portion of the capital budget?
It is the case with both. Sorry, when I was speaking about the RMR, it's because what you see is you see it in the capital budget as listed, but it might be more of an operating sense. So you would see it also go through the operating budget as an in and out, an expense and revenue. It's still contributed to by the reserves. It's just the way it's seen within the budget. It's because for many years we've had the question of, well, isn't that more of an operating? Well, yes, it is more of an operating sense, but it is a large ticket item. So it's sitting on the capital side so that council can see the large ticket item, because we can't just put it through reserves without council seeing the large ticket items on the capital list.
All right, I understand. So to be clear, that the capital budget in any given year, which I think you said is on average has been $1.5 million per year. All of that we see as transfers from within the operating budget and into capital reserves.
Yes, you're correct.
For all tax funded portions, aside from grants and other income, all of the entirety of the capital budget is drawn from within the operating reserve budget through reserves, right?
Yes, you're correct.
Okay, great, thanks. May I ask a second question, Your Worship?
Yes, Councillor Butler, proceed, and I will let you go until I see another hand up. And as yet, I've not seen another.
Careful what you say. I don't have too many. Mrs. Malinchuk, you said that on average transfers to reserves over the past number of years has been about $1.5 million. In this budget presentation, what would transfer to reserves? What would be the amount of transfers to reserves?
Sorry, I just presented that to council, and I would have to bring up my sheet one more time, as I often, well, I'm looking at numbers every day, day in and day out.
Well, yeah, you did, and I could have pulled that up. I suppose the reason I'm asking here is I would like that to be, publicly acknowledged. As you mentioned, that our annual average contribution over the past number of years has been $1.5 million. I think it's interesting to understand what it would be in this budget.
Definitely.
But we could come back to that. And then I have a question for Mr. Greathead. And that is, I thought when we briefly saw that slide with the Connaught project for $200,000 and the cottage clinic for $30,000, I thought there was an additional item of $180,000 referencing JCHC housing, but I didn't hear a reference to that number. So I'm wondering what that number is, or if I misunderstood. And that was a question for Mr. Greathead. Okay.
Can I respond to this one later? Sorry, I'm not working out of the office right now, so I don't have access to all that.
Sure. That's fine. Thank you. And then I have one final question, at least for now. Can I proceed with that?
Yes, please do.
All right. I guess this question is, Mrs. Malinchuk, is around the most funding overall, which I think you mentioned was up to $3.3 million, and you expressed optimism that we would be able to take advantage of probably all of that. So I'm wondering to what extent that funding is factored into the 2021 budget. I don't see anywhere within the budget budget that we have been provided with. I don't see any of that funding attributed or allocated. So I'm wondering how you see that pretty large amount of funding affecting the 2021 budget.
Yes, Your Worship, through to Councillor Butler. That I could have went into more with the slide, and I wasn't sure if we needed to at this point, but it is a really good question. And my answer is for this is that we will have to look at the year end. We will have to ensure that we have that we balance, that we are able to take care of the final numbers, and we might have to allocate some of that to 2020. Now, if there were, and there will be, some fundings left over, what I was anticipating to do was to go to council with a request for decision on how council would like to see that money used. Now, there are some options. We, as council also alluded to earlier, there was the potential for future tax offset or setting up a reserve, stability reserve going forward, and maybe potentially using funds as needed in future years to come. Now, we will have to ensure that our books are balanced, obviously, for the year. We will not be able to know exactly how much we have left over until we have our final audit and make sure that everything goes through and is done. And once we have that final figure, then I could come back to council, and council can decide on how to allocate that remaining money going forward. Now, it could be set up as this contingency reserve, say, or it can offset some of this year's taxes or next year's next year or future years, whatever. That's all going to have to be determined by council going forward. I will not have the number until probably March or April. Now, that being said, it is before the tax bylaw is set. So it could potentially still be used towards this budget and offset the tax levy for the 2021 year, but you really won't know that until later. I don't have that crystal ball.
All right, so that makes sense. So what I think I'm hearing is that the budget you're presenting doesn't per se anticipate allocations from the most funding. And in that sense, we might see it as a little bit of a worst case budget. But where you find the opportunity to apply the most funding, it may create some surpluses compared to the budget that we're looking at. And you would come to council and we could have conversations about where we would put those surpluses. For example, we could choose to build our reserves somewhat further as a result, as just an example of what we could choose to do.
Yes, perfect summary.
All right. Gives me some comfort then. That's all I have for the moment. Thank you again very much for your presentation. And I do hope at one point to understand what I thought I saw as an additional $180,000 request relative to the underground services on the Connaught Drive projects from Mr. Greathead. Thank you.
Yes, and I will also bring up the reserves, and we will be putting together a document, as the mayor had alluded to earlier in the evening, that we would be receiving questions online and then answering online. Any questions that we do not get to with council this evening, they're also being recorded, and we will get those answered as well.
I appreciate that. That's just fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler and Mrs. Melanchuk for those responses. I don't see another hand. I'm going to ask a question myself, if I may, and then I'll come back to Councillor Demoda. I just saw your hand. Mrs. Melanchuk, in your presentation, there was reference to a pie chart that depicts spending by department. And I wonder whether and what work would be involved in giving both council and the public a similar pie graph, but based on expenditures by type or function rather than by department. On page 9 of the written material that I have from the budget presentation, you've listed a number of expenditures more by type. So salary, wages, and benefits, contracted and general services, materials, goods, supplies, transfers to external organizations, things of that nature. So is it possible to produce a pie graph that shows how our expenditures are apportioned by type rather than just by department?
Most definitely. I have that already broken out. I just have to throw it into charts. And
Just have to bake it in a pie.
yes.
All right. Well, I would be interested in seeing that. I think it makes the whole operation a bit more understandable, at least for some. And I will ask, because I had this opportunity, I see you, Councillor Kelleher MP. So after Councillor Demoda, it shall be you. I was going to ask one additional question. However, Mrs. Melanchuk, again, it's from page 38 of the budget document. And that shows a table of the 2021 net tax envelope. And I just want to confirm that on the basis of that proposed budget, and recognizing that we're required by law to have a balanced budget, so revenues and expenditures are equal. And from my reading of those graphs, the net result is that proposed for 2021 is a 2.4% reduction from what we experienced in 2019. So that despite the aberration that 2020 was, we're looking at effectively 2 years of zero or a little bit less. Is that an accurate interpretation of that graph?
Yes, Your Worship. Sorry, I was scrolling through to see where you were talking, which page you were talking to, but yes.
All right. Thank you very much. That as with the most funding, is also welcome news. And Councillor Butler, I saw your hand up again, but I will go first to Councillor Demoda, then Councillor Kelleher MP, and then back to Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What page were you referring to just now? The last one with the graph? I was trying to scroll to it and I wanted to see what you were talking about.
Yeah, forgive me for interrupting. That's also why I was waving. I only just found the page and I don't understand the question, and therefore I didn't understand the answer. I wondered if you could go over.
Yeah.
Being somewhat tactile, I in fact printed the budget that was presented a couple of days ago over the weekend. And I am looking at a paper document, and it is labeled page 38, but it is from the presentation that was emailed to us on the weekend.
Therefore, 29 if you are looking at it online, but it does have 30 at the bottom of the page. Yeah, I don't know why that occurred, but if you're looking at it online on the PDF, it's 29, but it is page 38.
Sorry to add that confusion.
Oh,
No,
and
I got it. Well, it's just, I was scrolling and it went from page 27 to 39 and to 38, sorry. And then I get it now.
Yes, and I just saw that too. I don't know why that happened.
All right. Councillor Butler, does that answer your question?
Well, sorry, no, not really, because I couldn't understand the question, and I wondered, Mr. Ireland, if you could repeat it and we could hear the answer, because I couldn't understand it because I wasn't able to see the numbers you were referencing, and it sounded
I
really
was
important.
in the same boat.
All right, I will re-ask the question, and if we're all looking at apparently page 29, that's numbered 38 for whatever reason. But at the top of that page, 2021 net tax envelope, and there are two graphs. One is revenue and one is expense. And for 2021, those two numbers total $20,311,477, which from my reading is a decrease of $446,000 from 2019, or a 2.42% reduction. And so my question was, am I correct in interpreting that graph as indicating that the proposed budget for 2021 is a net reduction of that amount, 2.4% from 2019, so that effectively, despite the aberration of 2020, we are effectively looking at 0% over the last 2 years. And I think I got a yes to that suggestion.
Right, thank you very much.
And if I may add to that, it might be a bit confusing looking at those numbers, but it's the budget, and there were significant changes going into the next year, say for instance, daycare alone. So daycare's numbers, when we're looking at revenue and expenses, have changed drastically. So when we're looking at the budget itself, that's what we're looking at. But if we're looking at the taxes, then those are different figures and how you would compare them. So, and in the comparison of just looking at the budget itself, then that is correct.
Thank you. Councillor Demota, you were questioning initially what I was talking about. Do you have another question?
Yeah, not my real question. My other question was on the asset management software, Ms. Malinchak. With that, does the information that you want to get in there include the initiative that we took with our GIS mapping of in-ground infrastructure and all that, the other stuff that was put into that project?
Yes, Your Worship, through to Councillor Demota. Yes, obviously all of the information that was attained through the study, any information that we also have through our current contract that we hold with Parks Canada, that position is, I believe, done in 2021 or 2. I can't remember at the moment. It's 2022. So any of the information that we can pull from that person going into that system would also be very, very helpful at this point. To have him is a huge asset to beginning that process now.
Okay, and hopefully it interfaces, because we've had those issues in the past before, and that ends up being a mountain of work if not, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes,
thank you for that.
And we're definitely paying attention to that.
All right. Thank you.
Councillor Keller-Hrampe.
Thank you, Mrs. Malinchak. I just am curious about paid parking. You said that it would be 1.1 million with the expense taken out of approximately 200,000 with 925. Was that based on all parking lots year round, or how did you come up with those numbers?
Yes, Your Worship, through to Councillor Keller-Hrampe. So this was done by, I asked an outside source to put the budget together. Now it was based off of all of our parking spaces downtown core, so our central business district, all of our parking lot spaces at 50%. So during the, so there was considerations for our high season as well as our lower season. And that was the amount that was come up. So we figured that 50% of the space being used over the year is probably a pretty safe number to start with. And then the next year we'll have a better idea budgeting going forward, because we'll have the statistics behind it for certain. Now, the expenses itself would be the one staff member, the additional one staff member. And I think I can just go back to that slide real quick. Just a moment here. So the expenses on the initial year was 120,000. That's for the setup of the signage and including the fees. And then we were thinking it would be about an additional 64,000 in staff expense. So at the very least, that would be covered. And we would still see the revenue coming forward. So even in a very, very slow year, our expenses would be offset and we would see a revenue. Now, we are suggesting a lot more than what I just spoke to, but that's a worst case scenario.
Thank you, Ms. Mellinger.
Thank you, Councillor Kelleher-Empey. Councillor Butler, I think we've answered your question, and it was about page 38. I don't see another hand. We've intruded a bit into our break time, but we still have a few minutes left. But I am prepared at this time to call the break that was scheduled for 7:15, and then we will resume at 7:30 with Protective Services and Mr. Van Tighem. One last chance. I see no hands, so thank you. We will just stand in recess for the next 8 minutes I have and reconvene at 7:30. Thank you.
Pardon me, Mr. Mayor.
Not lost. I was giving it one more minute. I don't have 7:30 yet. But now I do. All right. The next presentation is Protective Services. We can go straight to Mr. Van Tighem, who I see is unmuted, unless Mrs. Melanchuk, you had any brief introduction.
No, Mr. Van Tighem can go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. So welcome, Mr. Van Tighem, and the floor is yours.
Welcome. Thank you. I'm just trying to figure out the screen share option here. I'm assuming you don't see my screen.
Not yet.
Okay. I might need some technical help here. I'll go back to here and back. I bet you see it now.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes, it's there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Your Worship, Mayor Ireland and Council. Also like to thank the public and staff that are attending. Thankful that you're all attending this, and I will provide a short introduction, which is meant mostly for guests or residents, not so much for council. I think you all know who I am. So the Protective Services Department encompasses the fire department, the bylaw department, major emergency management, fire smart projects and programming, which includes the force fuel reduction projects, which most of you are familiar with, the smoke we see around town this time of year and into the next year. And also there's a community education component of the Fire Smart program, which is the local Fire Smart representative program, which is the local work bees and those sorts of things. As the Director of Protective Services, I fill multiple roles. The Fire Chief, the Bylaw Services Director, the Emergency Services Building Manager, the Fire Smart Project Manager, the ECC Coordinator, which is the Emergency Coordination Center in the event of a large or any type of a long-standing community event, similar to COVID or wildfire, that sort of thing. As well as the Director of Emergency Management, which is a provincial designation, which is designated through the Provincial Emergency Management Act. The fire department consists of the Fire Chief, the Deputy Chief, Don Smith, Assistant Chief of Training, Amy West, as well as a volunteer membership, which consists of 4 volunteer officers, 26 volunteer firefighters, as well as 8 auxiliary members. The fire department usually averages around just over 200 emergency responses per year. And this year to date, we are sitting at 110 emergency responses. The bylaw department, which consists of a manager, officer, as well as 1 officer, oversees the business and domestic animal licensing, the animal shelter, the issuance of permits and event requests. They manage the RV storage lots. Bylaw helps to maintain the governance of the municipality of Jasper through seeking cooperation and compliance through the enforcement of municipal and provincial statutes. As well, the third area that I'm in charge of is the emergency management, which is the disaster awareness and preparedness programming, which provides for coordinated preparedness and response to major emergencies affecting the municipality of Jasper, as well as into Jasper National Park in concert with Parks Canada. In this area, we're dealing with the Municipal Emergency Management Agency, staff and interagency training programming, the Municipal Emergency Coordination Center, which we call the ECC, emergency social services, public education programming, as well as public information, and the annual emergency plan exercise and the workshops and the training that goes along with that. And lastly, the Fire Smart programming, which includes the force fuel reduction program. The goal of this program is to mitigate wildfire hazards to our community. We're trying to provide an increased community protection from the encroaching wildfires by reducing the wildfire fuel load in the forest and reducing the wildfire extreme behavior around the town site, as well as along designated evacuation routes. And we also work very closely with Parks Canada in this regard, out into the greater landscape out through the municipality. This fuel reduction program is also complemented by the Fire Smart Canada Community Recognition Program, which we are deeply involved in. Unfortunately, the last year, due to COVID, we have not been very involved. This is a national initiative, which is promoting wildfire risk education. It's through a citizen-led Fire Smart Risk program. And it's delivered and facilitated by myself, as well as a team of trained volunteer firefighters. All the firefighters are trained as local Fire Smart representatives, which we call LFRs. The LFRs promote the program. They recruit residents in neighborhood groups. These individuals are called community champions, and the LFRs will assist those neighborhoods with work bees and home hazard assessments, etc. I changed the slide. So to talk about a year of success, it's been an extremely challenging year. It's been an interesting year, but I would say that protective services as a whole has successfully adapted to the realities and the challenges of operating this year under the COVID situation. As we all know, it's not over now. It's not going to be over probably for a long time. We have fine-tuned our operations to the point where we are functioning very well under the new conditions. to the effect that, for example, the fire department does not do face-to-face training. We're doing virtual training on Tuesday nights. And when we do have an incident response, we have protocol in place to ensure the safety and the health of everybody involved. We have successfully carried out various roles of responsibilities at the municipal emergency planning level in the ECC. As it pertains to the COVID-19 response. We initiated the ECC earlier on in the event, and we worked quite well, and I think served the community well. The fire department hosted some training this year, not as much as normal, but we were still very active. We hosted the NFPA 1072 hazmat operations, as well as the 215 wildland urban interface training courses. We also participated in a few regional training initiatives to certify our firefighters in 1002 pump operations, as well as the fire service instructor training program. We also earlier this year successfully recruited 4 new fire department members who've all completed an extensive orientation, gone through a process of recruit training and an evaluation process, and they're coming along to the end of their probation. The Fire Smart Force Fuel Reduction Program, which has been an ongoing program. We again partnered with Parks Canada. We received both financial and operational support from Parks. As well, in 2019, we had received a FRIA grant, and FRIA is the Forest Resource Improvement Association of Alberta. They are the body that supports municipalities with grant funding for Fire Smart initiatives. And we had this past year, and in fact, I'm just actually submitting the final report this week. We have completed an additional 10 what we call fuel management units, which equates to over 10 hectares. One thing to understand is that our Fire Smart calendar does not go from January to December. We actually, our Fire Smart season is from usually October to about March. So we overlap a year. Bylaw services operations implemented COVID-19 mitigation measures with improvements to the current sidewalk seating permits and the new temporary sidewalk seating extension pilot project under some extremely tight timelines. The 2 staff carried out enforcement duties of what normally would take 4 officers over a busy summer season. And in the past year, COVID or not, it did turn out that we did have some very substantial visitor numbers. Working with Parks Canada, James McCormick and myself updated the municipal and the greater area evacuation plan. And we did this to include the outlying populated areas, as well as backcountry areas that are populated throughout the year by various users. Unfortunately, our annual exercise, which was slated for May this year, was canceled due to COVID. And the emergency social services plan, which was finalized earlier this year, initiated through myself and Kathleen Waxer and Leanne at CFS. It was finalized again. It's an extremely well done plan, and it fits right in with our main emergency plan. And it closed a lot of the gaps that were there before when it comes to collection points and registering and reception of individuals involved in an emergency. And as far as the emergency management, we had a number of our staff take the advanced ICS, the emergency management team training, the IMT training at NATE late last year. Then again, some took some training this year. And again, that was reduced because of COVID. But we continue to train at a higher level than a lot in this regard, which is a promising thing. And the Alberta Emergency Management Agency, which is the provincial body that oversees our emergency preparedness, they'll do 2 audits on the municipality each year. And we passed successfully our first audit. And we are set up mid next month in December for our final audit and working towards meeting those goals there. Upcoming initiatives for the next year, for 2021. We will be improving the fire prevention and inspection program. Our goal is to increase the productivity and the consistency of the fire prevention inspection program. We have designed over the last year a very comprehensive commercial inspection schedule, which is based on occupancy types and fire code and building code requirements. And we'll be allocating resources to implement this very early in 2021 and moving forward. We will be initiating another firefighter recruitment drive in early 2021, looking to perhaps bring on 4 to 6 new firefighters in the spring. We're looking to improve the bylaw officer training. The goal initially now is to train the officers to the CPO level 1 in preparation for the provincial changeover. This will certainly help provide the necessary service level that we require, as well as the resources required, and it'll improve the overall officer safety. And as we know, we have an identified amount in the budget this year. And as we know, this amount is basically there as a placeholder for the discussions that we are having. And this is by no means written in stone, but we're working towards that. In going to the fuel reduction program, the initial program in Jasper was from 2004 to 2011. And we've recently just about to complete a 4-year program that we initiated in 2017. And that program it was a free of funded program. It was also supported by Parks Canada. We will be complete, I would say, by early 2021. As far as the free of funding part of it, we are complete now, and then we will be submitting the paperwork. And that will be ongoing up until probably into April of 2021. We have a new initiative that began by the provincial government earlier this year. They came up with a document called the Local Authority Emergency Management Regulations. It came into force in January of 2020. And basically it involves a rewrite of a lot of our municipal emergency management practices and planning and whatnot. So we will be looking to review and update all emergency management plans and procedures in order to comply with this new directive. One of the things that has to be done, which is in the works right now, is rewriting the municipal bylaw, which will have to go to council, reviewing all our emergency plans, and making sure that we complete the mandatory exercises and training. Something new is the initiative to form regional service commissions. And the reason for that is that it's become very apparent that the majority of municipalities don't have the depth or the bench strength to deal with a long-term major emergency. So it's more looking at a collaborative effect where you could share resources from community to community. But what we're looking at doing is forming a formal partnership with our surrounding communities so that structure is in place prior to an event. Also, there's going to be some updating for training required to elected officials, to management and employees. There's also a specific course now designed for the Director of Emergency Management, the DEM course, which has to be taken by all DEMs and acting DEMs. And one of the most important things in my slate is to review and finalize the delegation of the local authority with Parks Canada. We have been working for the last couple of years with Parks Canada to come up with a document that formalizes how the local authority looks in a major emergency in a municipality within a national park. And finally, under the leadership of the new director early in the next year or in the spring, is to develop a protective services strategic plan and some direction moving forward. Some of the budget highlights we'll just touch on lightly. With the fire department, there's some lost revenue compared to 2019, which occurred because of the fact that we have initiated a new contract with Parks Canada. We have an emergency services agreement And in the past, prior to 2020, the agreement was based on call volume in areas. And so there was a sort of a fee paid per responses to various areas. And every year the number was different. It jumped up and down. Parks is very interested in seeing that number being consistent. So we met earlier in 2020 and we came up with a number a little bit higher than the average. That number was a little lower than the previous year. So that's where you see a $13,000 difference. As well as there's about another $13,000 in kind of the ups and downs within the different line items. In some of the line items, and that's based on just looking at realistic trending and seeing that, you know, there's a few things like vehicle repairs that have been trending upwards fairly consistently and very obviously over the last few years. And the other one is in this item, there's a fairly big increase just in utilities alone. It's a $6,000 increase in utilities. In the emergency management line, that line didn't exist in 2019. That's something we just started in 2020. So that's a new number. That's why that one jumps out. And in the bylaw and compound item lines there, there's loss of revenue again anticipated going into the next year with fines and business licenses. There's some offset by the increase in sidewalk seating to the tune of about $7,000. But we also added that $23,000 to this line item, which is a kind of a high-end number for the CPO training. If that's approved, you know, it could be less, it could be close, but we put that number in there just thinking it was a reasonable number. And then there's some other incremental charges that are like insurance, utilities, and some building costs there. So just an example of some budget service level requests for fire and emergency measures, for example. We're looking at an additional $11,088, so roughly $11,000, and that's basically what's that attributed to. It's attributed to the fact that we are initiating the toxic roundup program again next year, which is something we haven't done, I think, for the last 2 years, and it's something that we feel is a very valuable service to provide to the community. And toxic roundup, as you know, is basically assisting community members in getting toxic materials from their homes and making that like an easy transition to help them make their home safer, and then make it safer for our responders in our community as well. And then we've also bumped up in here another $3,500 in reallocation of maintenance costs, and $2,000 in vehicle repairs. And there's a few other little things there too. So going on to the capital requests, and actually I have a slide for each one of these. So in the 2021 capital, there was 2 items right off the top that were deferred from last year. That was the replacement of the front sidewalks and the parking plugs at the emergency services building. There was also the training room reno at the emergency services building. A new initiative this year is a live fire training props, which I'll speak to, as well as the AEDs, which I'll speak to. The next 3 items I will speak to briefly, but then I'm going to ask our Director of Operations, Acting Gord Hutton, to speak, as he was the one that actually put the numbers on these items as they are operational to his department. So the first one is the emergency services building, replacement of the front sidewalk and the parking plug. This was deferred, as I said, from last year. I've added some pictures just to give you a bit of a visual, and I'll try and explain it. So in the past, there's been some safety issues cited in some of the previous health and safety inspections. One of them is the deterioration of the front sidewalk area of the emergency services building. This is the main entrance, which is causing a fairly noticeable trip hazard. Another one is the electrical pedestals at the parking at the back and side of the building. This has been an ongoing issue for 3 or 4 years, and most of them have been at one time or another have been backed over and knocked down. We've had 2 out of commission because there was wires exposed, but they were never installed properly in the first place. They were basically installed right into the ground, no proper foundation, and they were also installed too close to the parking stall so that if someone wasn't paying attention, it was very easy to bump into it or knock it over, which is what happened numerous times. So right now we have 5 parking plug pedestals at the emergency services building. They're all on the one side of the building, so closest to Mayette. The 2 furthest, they're allocated to the tenants of the apartment. So that leaves 3 for fire department use. We, as a fire department, requires more than 3. We have 3 command vehicles as well as 3 SPU trailers, the structural protection unit trailers, 2 of which need to be plugged in the summer for the radios and whatnot to keep them charged. And so I guess the plan for this one was we obviously have to provide these parking plugins for the tenants. So the plan was to install 2 new ones on the other side of the garbage bin, which is the EMS side of the parking, where there is no plugins. So install 2 new ones there, and then upgrade the 5 on the fire side so that they're further back from the parking stall and they're properly mounted in proper concrete foundations, safe distance back so that they won't get bumped into. So that's kind of a 2-part project. Again, Gord Hutton could speak to this. He's done some research on this. The training room renovation, that's another one that was deferred. This was deferred in 2020. And this one is to repair or replace some of the existing 18-year-old infrastructure in the training room and the kitchen. Some of the things that need to happen are replacing the flooring. It's carpet flooring, which is every seam is coming apart. Some worse than others, but as far as the carpet itself, it's worn and dirty. Even though it does get cleaned twice a year, it's hard to maintain. The cupboards in the kitchen are delaminating in some places, as well as the backsplash on the sink has cracked and there's water draining down between the 2 walls there. Some of that is just minor maintenance. For example, the cupboards, we've evaluated that we don't need to replace all the cupboards. We need to just deal with the delaminated cupboard doors, so that's a cost saving. The cooking appliance is acting up. It's a very low-end electric range. Would have to be replaced, as well as there was never a proper ventilation system installed in the kitchen when the building was built. So a range hood ventilation system. And that's something, again, that was identified in the last couple of health and safety inspections. And the training room is really a key asset for the municipality. It's our main fire department training room. Other municipal groups, as well as Parks Canada groups, use it as a meeting area. And it's also the municipal emergency coordination center. So the kitchen is very important and needs to be functional. And it needs to be able to provide for larger groups. Now, obviously, maybe not in this present day, but in the future. Live fire training prop. The initial hope with this is to secure ID 12 MSI funds to cover the cost of this $56,000 addition. So with the increase in training levels and standards over the last few years, live fire training of firefighters has become very challenging. In the past, our fire department had utilized old buildings, old vehicles. We used oil and gas fueled burn pans to simulate live fire training. And for the last few years, we've actually traveled to Hinton numerous times and rented their live fire training props in their training area. But this is starting to prove to be very impractical, as we're having to travel in groups, and we're having to take not just the firefighters, but a fire truck or 2 out of service from our community to do the training in Hinton. Aside from improving our proficiency through this regular live training fire opportunities, there's something most people don't think about. There's a mental component as well. When it comes to fighting live fire, it can be a little nerve-wracking. So by inoculating our firefighters to the stress of a live fire event in a controlled training environment, we're able to gradually dial up their stress level, and then they're able to better cope with the real event when that does come. So the bottom line here is that with these live fire props, we can and will safely and routinely be able to train as closely to reality as possible. One of the positives here is the Jasper Volunteer Fire Brigade Society has already kickstarted this project by donating the foundation of this live fire training system, which is the pilot control module and the hose line system, as well as in that package, which is required, is the factory training component. And again, this is something that cannot happen in the current environment because the training individual comes from the United States. So this request is to purchase the individual vehicle fire component, as well as the pressure vessel training component. The vehicle fires are very common response type for our department, and vehicle fire training is required in our 1001 level 1 training, and it's part of our annual core competencies and something we deal with a lot. And the pressure vessel is also part of the 1072 hazmat training certifications. So again, that's a new initiative that we are hopefully going to be able to receive some grant funding for. And we do have the foundation of the system already with a very small, I think it's a barbecue unit that, so it can still be utilized now, but in order for it to be effective, we need the two larger props, which you see in the picture is the car prop, and then the other one is the pressure vessel prop, which you don't see. Next one, it has been budgeted for in the last couple of years, but it's a new initiative for 2021, is the automated external defibrillators, the AEDs, to the tune of $10,000. So the NFPA 1901, the new guidelines that came out last year, indicate that all apparatus should carry an AED device. Presently, our fire department only has 3 of these units. Our bylaw department has none. So this project would be to purchase 5 more at a cost of $2,000 each, and position them so that they're in bylaw vehicles and the large apparatus of the fire department. And also the potential for a portable backpack version that could be used, moved around and whatnot. So the NFPA standard is mainly, it's put in place to protect the emergency workers, but there's an added benefit to the community in carrying them on all the vehicles. Many communities position AEDs all over their downtown. A lot of them have them in their municipal buildings, as we do in some, for quick access and increased availability to the public. It's considered a standard tool for first responders as well as for bystanders, and they're all fully automatic self-guiding devices. So they're not difficult to operate, as well as we are participants in the Alberta Health Services medical first responder program. There's lots of times where we potentially could be first on scene as a fire department prior to EMS, or even during regular trips around town, bylaw patrols. You could easily find somebody on a scene, someone that's having an issue and needs help. I'm getting into the area that I don't have a lot of knowledge about, but I will speak to the emergency services boiler replacement, and I'll let Gord speak to that too. But and essentially these boilers and hot water tanks that the emergency services building are reaching the end of their projected life. They have been plagued from day one almost with regular breakdowns, and they have seldom functioned at 100% efficiency. Parts are challenging to source, and some are unreasonably expensive. So the recommendation is by proactively replacing the boilers in the hot water system, that aligns with our asset management plans and protects against the future of mechanical systems resulting in a service disruption or a critical service failure. And again, I'll let Gord speak to that. And the next one is the emergency. Nope, I went too far. It is the emergency services building fire bay laundry improvements. This one is something that needs to be understood is that the fire department, the firefighters use turnout gear. We call it turnout gear. That's our bunker gear that we respond to our emergencies with, as well as coveralls for other emergencies. But it's very susceptible to receiving toxins from the environment that we're working in. And there's some very strict guidelines on how you wash and deal with that cancer-causing gear that ends up polluting basically the people and the facility. So a few years ago, we purchased a proper washer, which you can see in the picture on the left, and had it installed. Unfortunately, the drainage and a few things weren't compliant to what the machine was designed for, but we did get it working. And last year we purchased a commercial dryer that is certified or approved by the NFPA. Unfortunately, the dryer has nowhere to go because the space that was allocated in the design of the building doesn't have room to fit the two appliances. So we had to figure out where we're going to put it. But the other problem with the dryer is you need ventilation. And so it needs to be near an outside wall preferably, but we don't have a lot of space. So it's a bit of a puzzle, and Gord Hutton has looked into it and he's come up with a solution. But unfortunately, there's a cost to that because we have to run the piping and whatnot, and the drains and the washer have to be improved. So I think if Gord is there, I can just pass it to him to speak to these last three items, if he wishes.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. I am here. Do you want me to start with the outdoor plugs or the boilers?
We will go to the plugs, Gord. Here we go.
Okay. I think you gave a very good summary, Greg. The only one thing I would like to, or 2 points I would like to add, the bricks that are degrading in the front have become a trip hazard and do need to be replaced just from a basic health and safety perspective. I feel they probably deteriorated just due to ice melt conditions and freeze thaw. I would like to replace that with concrete rather than the bricks. It would give a prolonged life cycle. And the other comment I would make about the plugs is moving them back away from the parking stalls would allow us to put a proper walkway in there, which is crucial for firefighters responding. As it works now, they jump out of their vehicles and run across some flower beds and landscaping. It could be slippery, muddy, a little dangerous at times. So it would allow us to do some safety improvements and also move those plugs so they're not getting knocked over by vehicles. I think that's all I had to say on that, Greg. If we can move down. Yeah, I think everyone still thinks the fire hall is a new building. It is 18 years old. The boilers that were installed in there were of low quality. They've never worked properly. The picture I chose there shows a juice jug underneath the boiler catching the condensation. These boilers are intended to be a modulating boiler, which sort of has an infinite control from low to high. Those controls never have worked, so they fire on high every time, creating excessive amount of condensation, which leaks back down the drains. Just to give you an example on parts, the fire rod, which is a component that detects whether the boilers are working or not, we have to buy off-the-shelf fire rods, cut them, bend them, and hope that we cut them to the right length and bent them to the right angle to get them to work. It's a little bit of a finicky process, but we've got it down to a science now. But yeah, these boilers are not functioning well. I'm worried that they will stop working at some point. And the recommendation at that is to replace the domestic hot water tanks, the DHW, at the same time. The boilers are integrated with the hot water system. So to replace one with the other would be a little less than proactive. We can move on to the laundry. Yeah, this is a high cost, but it's because we're looking at doing upgrades to the drainage, the ventilation, the water supply, and the electrical supply, and redesigning the closet area that you can see where the washer and dryer are sitting. That area was set up and designed when the building was constructed for a small residential washer and dryer. The cleaning requirements for turnout gear have changed substantially since then. And so the newer equipment required to give a proper cleaning to turnout gear just does not fit well in that space, but we can make it fit with those modifications. Thanks, Greg. And the last one we have is a bylaw opposite laminate flooring. You can see a high traffic area where the desk chair sits. The top coat on the flooring is worn through, so we're exposed to the wood subgrade. Leaving it like this is prone to water getting in, mold development, for accelerated deterioration of the flooring and subflooring as well. So this is just a simple replacement. I've priced it so we could go with a more industrial component. This laminate flooring that was put in would have been fine in a residential application, but not in an office setting where there's a very distinct wear paths. And Greg, I think that's all I had to add on those.
Thank you, Gord. And I'll pass it back to Natasha for facilitation here.
Thank you very much. I guess at this point, we're open for any council questions on protective services going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Melichuk. Thank you, Mr. Van Tighem and Mr. Hutton. I'll just remind councillors that we've gone about 9 minutes overtime, so I will not stop you from asking any question, but just be as concise as possible. So questions for Mr. Van Tighem from councillors? As you consider then, Mr. Van Tighem, I had a couple of questions. Firstly, with respect to the live fire props, is there a confirmed place in Jasper where you can do live fire exercises if you had the ability to do them?
Yes, I guess one of the benefits of the particular props that we are looking at is that they're mobile. So they would not be a permanent structure anywhere. We do have our what we call our extrication lock in S block, where there's a large area where we can use the props there. So that's the designated area for using those props.
Okay, thank you for that. And more specific to budgetary items operating in particular, you made brief reference in your presentation to business licensing, I think. And so when I look at the operating budget for emergency services or protective services, if I look at the revenue line items, there is something called bylaw enforcement and other. Does that other include business licensing?
I actually don't have that. I'm going to pass that to Ms. Melanchuk.
Yes, Your Worship. There's a portion of business licensing that goes to administration as well as to bylaw.
All right, thank you for that. And similar to the earlier presentation about the possibility of revenue generated from paid parking, has administration put any concerted effort into looking at business licensing fees and whether they are reflective of our current principle, which is simply cost recovery, whether we're not even covering our costs, and whether we could look at a change in principle behind business licensing fees.
I might answer that, Your Worship. Yes, the work began actually in the new year this year. And then COVID started and it kind of put everything to a halt in regards to that. So the study, I got my staff looking into all of that, and we have some data recorded. However, because of the busyness of COVID, we haven't been able to dive into it any further. It has started. We can continue the work. I think it's definitely a good project going forward. I don't know if we can have it ready for the new year, but maybe to implement soon in the new year, if council wish. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Questions from other councillors? Councillor Butler.
Thanks very much. And Mr. Van Diggum, thank you very much for the detailed presentation. And Mr. Hutton, it's easy to understand. I don't really take issue with any of the requests. I do have a 1967 Volkswagen van kicking around, and you can have that for nothing, and you can set it on fire as many times as you want. So I'm just offering my help there.
Wait, I'll take it.
Wait,
I'll
no,
pay
wait.
for it. Wait.
He offered that to me, Councillor Demota, so I will accept.
Though it's been parked for a really long time somewhere around town. It might have been towed and I wouldn't know about it. So there is that. I guess what I wanted to mention, and it's not a question, is just, I guess on behalf of the taxpayer, express a bit of frustration, and it is absolutely not reflective on any current staff, but it is frustrating to find ourselves replacing boiler systems at 8 years. I understand
18.
they were not 18, at 18, sorry, I know that. And concrete drives at 18 years, I think we probably around it, but it seems early to be having to do that. But I don't question the need for it, and I know enough to know that it needs to be done or it wouldn't be asked for. And then I was actually going to ask the question that Mayor Ireland referenced around business licensing. And I suppose, again, I feel bound to express a little bit of frustration in the sense that our business licensing bylaw was passed in 2009, and we're still charging the same fees for business licensing as we were in 2009. And, you know, we've been subject to 12 years of inflationary decreases. And I do feel that we collectively in the municipal organization have to do better about keeping up to date all of our income generating opportunities and not letting them flag and just not pay attention for years, because the $165 we're charging for a business license, if it was a cost recovery figure in 2009, well, it's certainly not a cost recovery figure now. And we need to stay on top of those things. It is difficult to accept annual requests for increases in taxation when other sources of revenue seem to flag behind. And so not a question, but a comment. And I will acknowledge and appreciate that we seem to be doing better on that, and we have to keep up that work and ensure that any and all income sources other than taxation itself are always that advantage is maximized for the community. So thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Councillor Demota.
Well, thank you very much, Councillor Butler, for bringing that up. And I think that was very studious of you to look that up. Just out of curiosity, through you, Mr. Mayor, back to Councillor Butler, what would that $164, sorry if it sounds like an infomercial now, what would that $164 a year look like now with inflation? What would that actually be worth in today's dollars?
Oh, about $130 or $135.
Okay,
That's
so
an
yeah,
average.
we're losing money. Okay, thank you. I figured you could have that. Thanks.
All right, again, we are just briefly over time, so if there are not further questions, thank you again. I thought it worth noting the irony for both Mr. Van Tighem and Mr. Hutton. We have what Mr. Hutton referred to as a new fire hall, which I still think of as a new fire hall because the old fire hall wasn't big enough for the fire truck. And now the new fire hall isn't big enough for the dryer. Anyway, thank you very much for that presentation. And we can now go to the presentation for Culture and Recreation and Mrs. McNabb.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, and members of the public. As Director of Culture and Recreation, I oversee the Activity Center, the Fitness and Aquatic Center, the Arena, Centennial Park and Log Cabin, Robson Park, the Library Cultural Center, Commemoration Park, the Downtown Washrooms, and Cabin Creek Park. So those are the items, the facilities that fall under my direction. I'm going to try and go through fairly quickly to keep us on track, but please slow me down if I go a little too quickly. So, year in success. So the ICIP grant, we were awarded $3.6 million for the ICIP grant. This is something that we put in 2017. We've been trying for grants since I started in the position in 2001. We've applied for numerous grants, usually about every 2 years, a new one comes out and we attempt to apply for it to the maximum capacity. So we were thrilled that we were accepted with the ICIP grant. The multi-purpose hall renovations are complete. The curling rink slab is replaced and should be operational by mid-December. The arena slab and boards are in the process of being replaced. So we're just waiting for the boards to be installed right now. The arena lobby roof was redone. The beams and roof leaks at the aquatic center were completed. The water slide stairs replacement, and it's open and operating. Successful relaunch of facilities after COVID lockdown. 98% of the staff recalled. Thank you, staff. Health and safety audit, a successful health and safety audit. The basement shower renovations contribute to successful management of COVID-19 within our community at the onset. Lighting upgrades to LED in the gymnastics area. So all those lights are now LEDs. Meeting room repurposing for the out of school care program. Asbestos abatement in the activity center basement. All single-use plastic vending machines removed from the recreation facilities. Brought fire extinguishers and sprinklers up to code and repaired blockages in the sprinkler lines. Chlorine alarm improvements. Aquatic center boiler repairs. Boiler certifications for all culture and recreation boilers. Brought basement stairwell doors up to code. And electric vehicle for the arena. So that was just a few of our successes. Upcoming initiatives. So ICIP grant work is going to take a significant amount of time to work through and to plan out. Capital project focus. Repair damage in the racquetball courts caused by roof leakage. Update job descriptions to meet health and safety legislation. Update health and safety hazard assessments per job duty. That one's going to be extremely time consuming. Prepare for external health and safety audit, which is going to take place in 2021. So some highlights from or significant changes by department. So if you look at the first one, external requests, the external requests include $16,000 for the museum. It also includes the Jasper Artists Guild first year request portion seen here at $4,000. And the other portions are seen in the library. So when you see external requests, some of them fall under the library and some of them fall under the external requests. Under the activity center, the increased revenue of 10K is mostly due to reallocation of custodial costs. So that is an internal revenue that comes in, similar to reallocation of maintenance costs. Increase to expense of 4K. So that is for insurance, those types of things brought that up. Grounds, increase in revenue from people wanting to do outdoor activities. In the getaway area, so there's a loss of getaway camps. Sports camps, we're anticipating that we will be able to continue with that. That's also going to be COVID dependent, but the getaway camps are based on school usage. So right now schools aren't doing any external travel. So with the getaways, you're going to see a lowering of expense of nearly $60,000 in catering and staff costs, but you're also going to see the loss of revenue. Library decrease in leases seen here in revenue from the external request of JAG at 6K and Habitat at 20K, resulting in $26,000 less revenue. The other $3,000 is decrease in revenue trending from 2019. In the arena, staffing increase alone is projected at $20,000. This is based on 2019 year-end numbers. The Fitness and Aquatic Center, so $120,000 projected revenue loss due to COVID. This revenue loss that we're projecting is really focused a lot in the program end of things, because it's very difficult to teach swimming lessons without getting spit in the face. So it's not something the programming is very difficult to do during COVID. And so that is where we're seeing a significant drop in revenue, mostly due to the programming that we're not able to offer. But we also offset with a $26,000 decrease in expenses. So there's a few up and down items on the line items. We also remember in staffing increases that there's step movements on the grid placement and contract negotiation increases. So debenture and reserves, I'll let Natasha speak to that one.
Yes, so I thought I would go over this as it's a little bit harder to understand or explain. We've discussed it before. What happened was in 2019, debenture repayment was set up. However, the debenture did not get taken out until the end of the year, resulting in payments beginning in 2020. So the amount was transferred to reserves and offset a large portion of the 2020 debt payment, which we do not see that offset in 2021. So that's where you see that change in the budget there. And that's what explains the debenture and restricted line. We can move forward.
Next slide. So the budget service level addition requests. So in the activity center, there is $20,000 of an increase in contracted services. This is to cover things like the fire suppression system, the fire extinguishers, the HVAC system, unit programming. This is the contractors around the unit programming. This is also boiler inspections. So these are things that occurred, but to a minimum standard years gone by. And so we've noticed in the last one, this last year, with the contracted services, especially in the fire suppression system, we found blockages in the lines that nobody knew were there, that needed to be completely removed and flushed out so that we actually had proper operating fire systems. So that is an increase to the contracted services there. And the other $38,000 in reallocation of reallocation of maintenance costs. Now the reallocation of maintenance cost has not yet been presented to you. So their budget will be coming tomorrow. So I really can't speak to the increase in the reallocation of maintenance costs. Grounds reallocation of maintenance costs, that was their increase, so the $2,700. The library, the $12,008 was reallocation of maintenance costs. The arena, the $8,000 increase there was reallocation of maintenance costs. The fitness and aquatic center, the $29,000 was reallocation of maintenance costs. Restricted reserves, the additional $75,000 to get back into an ideal allocation for restricted reserves. And the remainder of that amount, so sorry, I can't see that slide, it's pretty small. Yeah, so 75,000, sorry, was the restricted reserves allocation. So that's it from that slide. So capital requests. So the activity center renovation, that is the CI or ICIP grant. And these are the things that fall under that ICIP grant. So office meeting space design and construction, parking lot paving and drains, exit signs, main entrance demolition, fire spray downstairs, sidewalk replacement, entrance walkway redone, sound system upgrade, main electrical distribution, basement ventilation, upgrade basement finishes, increase accessibility, facility ventilation, and HVAC. The storage room in the multi-purpose space, that was carried over from last year. So the request is for $75,000. This area in the gymnastics area is completely accessible to any one of the kids. We store our mats in there for getaway camps. We store all the barbecue equipment for the July 1st barbecue. We store any extra equipment that we don't have proper storage room in. And so we really need to be able to put up some walls around that. It doesn't need to be sprinklered in there. If we leave the ceiling open, we just need to be able to get that closed off and do a proper storage area with proper doors to be able to get in and out and hide the equipment that we're storing and keep it safe. Okay, activity center. Just give me 1 second so I can get caught up here. The rooftop unit, that one is an ongoing yearly item that's going to come in. You're going to see rooftop units constantly being in because we have so many rooftop units and we replace them as required. So This may get done and it may not get done, but if we don't have the money in the budget, then in a complete failure, we have no way of making the repairs quickly without going back to council. And if something goes down in, say, October, it's really important that we're able to get these rooftop units completed in a timely fashion. They've been extremely good, operations and maintenance, at keeping them running, doing minor repairs, replacing belts, fans, motors, but the rooftop units are aging and some of them are upwards of 35 to 40 years old. The kitchen oven is at least 35 years old. Parts and repairs are very difficult to complete. The pilot lights are a continuing issue, and parts, like I said, parts are difficult to get. We've used or purchased used parts as a last option in trying to get repairs done to this stove. So it has served its life and needs to be replaced. The asbestos removal in the multi-purpose hall storage room. So this is one that, as we were doing repairs in the multi-purpose hall, this is one that has come up in the storage room. If you can see the little photo on the side, we thought we could just fix and patch these holes. Unbeknownst to us, that wall is asbestos containing, so it's not just a quick and easy patch job and fix to it. We need to protect that wall or remove the asbestos and then put in a wall that will be able to meet the demands and the tables hitting it and the chairs hitting it, so that we're not going to end up with the damage that occurs in that storage room. So that's to get the asbestos replaced and proper wall in there that won't get destroyed. Facility door replacement. So the facility doors, there's a few of them that absolutely need replacement at this particular point. The door jambs are not holding the hinges. The hinges are not holding in place. So the door jambs need to be replaced. Unfortunately, some of the door jambs in behind them is also asbestos containing. And some of the doors also contain asbestos. So we're looking especially at the multi-purpose hall door. That one is doesn't close properly at the best of times and doesn't lock properly. So that's one of our focuses on the facility door replacement. The mechanical room fire stopping. I will let Gord speak to this one. Mr. Hutton.
Yes, thank you, Yvonne. So in our main mechanical room in the basement of the activity center, that room should be a sealed unit. It's called a fire separation with a 1 hour burn through time to the adjoining areas. There is to be no air movement, no penetrations for fire, flame, smoke, toxic gases to escape. I've got two pictures on this slide. One is, you can see plywood being used as part of the separation, which is a combustible material and a no-go. And you can also see the sizable gaps in between the steel framing and the plywood. Clearly not a proper fire separation. And that's indicative to quite a few areas around the mechanical room. Also within the mechanical room, the other side shows where some penetrations have been filled with drywall mud or some other similar product, which is not an acceptable solution for gaps of that size. So we have attempts to make it better that really don't serve the purpose, and areas where the separation needs to be rebuilt, re-engineered, and sealed properly. And this is a code requirement. We've been directed by a codes inspection agency to have this done. There's no way to get around it. Thanks, Yvonne.
Thank you, Mr. Hutton. But here's another one for you.
Okay, you're going to keep me on the hot seat for a little longer.
That's right.
Yeah. So there is a small area in the curling rink in the exterior. It's hard to get a picture of, but where the masonry walls interact with the roof structure, there's some deterioration of the masonry product. I suspect there's water infiltrating in there. We need to do a bit more investigation and then plan for some repairs. It doesn't look like the damage is extensive, but I definitely would like to get after it come the spring season, so we don't go through many other winters with the freeze-thaw cycle and possibly encourage a bit more damage to that wall.
Thank you, Mr. Hutton. Presently, we can see daylight through the bricks at the top of that particular wall, the back wall. Okay, the
Okay.
daycare windows. Oh, Mr. Hutton, you're on again.
Yes, I'll keep going. Thanks, Yvonne. So the daycare windows in two areas. I just took a picture of one. The windows are at the end of their life cycle. The seals are gone on them. They allow quite a bit of solar gain into the daycare rooms and a fair bit of heat to escape in the winter time. So we're spending more money than we need to on air conditioning and more money than we need to on heating to try to regulate the temperature in that building. So it's just more or less a like-for-like replacement, just with a newer product, a bit more energy efficient, and to create a much more comfortable space for the children and the staff of the daycare facility. Looking to the log cabin in Centennial Park, the finishes throughout this facility are at the end of their life cycle. The cedar shake roof does not meet the fire smart regulations now. The shakes are deteriorated to the point that we are seeing some leaks starting on them. The washrooms are very run down. If you can see closely enough, the orange countertop with the two white sinks in it, you can see there's dings and dints in both of those sinks. The toilet partitions are mismatched and cobbled together. And on the top photo of the log cabin, you can also see the finish on the logs is bleached to the sun as it reaches the end of its expected life cycle too. So these are mainly cosmetic items, but they do add up. The other one that we'd like to do at the same time is do some electrical upgrades. One of the struggles we have with events hosting in the park is they often have power requirements beyond just a couple 110 plugins. This proposal would allow us to put in a vent panel permanently mounted on the facility that contractors, events personnel, etc., could tap into to get more power for lights, sound systems, coffee makers, griddles. Canada Day is a good example of where we struggle a bit for electrical needs in that facility.
Thank you, Mr. Hutton. So with regards to Culture and Rec grounds, the ball diamond bleachers. So the ball diamond bleachers, wrong picture was sent. Sorry about that, Natasha. So with the ball diamond bleachers, they are no longer to code. So anything that is higher than just 2 seats requires proper railings around the sides. So those ones are no longer to code. So we need to replace the ball diamond bleachers. The daycare yard drainage. So this is one Mr. Hutton can also speak to.
Thank you again, Yvonne. The way the daycare yard is situated, it's sandwiched between the aquatic center and the activity center. It's a low spot for drainage. And so during big rain events, during freeze-thaw cycles in the winter, it's prone to having water back up in it. It's inconvenient for the daycare as they can't always use the yard because it's either too icy, too slippery, or too wet. Having just had a child who finished daycare, I can appreciate the frustration parents have when their kid comes home, particularly soggy and sandy and muddy. I understand that's part of play and learning, but it's a bit excessive back there at times. The only real solution, because it is a low spot surrounded by structures, is to tie into the sanitary storm system. There was a system in that area, but it was decommissioned when the fitness center was built. I understand it was in the way, so it was abandoned. But this would be a good tie-in with the activity center project, the CIP grant, because it could address other drainage issues we have in the front, the Bonhomme Street side of the activity center. It's a really good example right now. If you go by that entranceway, you can see the water that's pooling and standing beside the main walkway. Proper sewer tying in would address all those issues. Thanks, Yvonne.
Thank you, Mr. Hutton. Okay, 2021 capital requests for the arena renovations. So this is part of the ICIP grant. So this was part of the items that were applied for in getting the ICIP grant. So the first one is engineering and architecture for 2021 construction plans for the arena universal and accessible change rooms, showers retiled and plumbing, universal and accessible change rooms, the arena seating, emergency exits, that's the upper level of the arena, being able to get out, and then the dehumidifier and HVAC for the arena. The economic impact for culture and recreation. So the facilities, as I mentioned earlier, there's quite a few facilities that fall under culture and recreation. Outdoor space is approximately 524,000 square feet, and indoor space is approximately 138,000 square feet. That's excluding the library and culture center. The economic impact of hockey tournaments. So we started off sorry, I lost my thoughts here. So there's approximately increase in arena tournaments from 15 in 2021 to 29 in 2018, 2019. Obviously, this year we're not going to hold that many tournaments, but we are looking at next year, hopefully being able to accommodate all those tournaments. So based on Travel Alberta stats, we're looking at the economic impact of approximately $1.6 million in 2001 to approximately $4 million now in 2018-19. And that's just a graph to show you where we've gone over the years with regards to the number of tournaments and the economic impact of tournaments per year. Okay, so the aquatic center renovations. Now these are subject to structure review, but there are some in here that I want to speak to as we go through. So we're looking at doing a structure review on the facility. I believe that was a question that council asked quite a while ago to determine the future repairs or replacement of the building and the components. In the renovations, these are items that are also included in the ICIP grant. So the universal change rooms design, the sound system, the sand filters and wade pool, the sand filters for the hot tub, heat exchangers, upgrades to the chlorine and chemical feed system, locker replacement, universal and accessible change rooms, pool LED lighting, so the main pool mechanical boiler design, what we're looking at here is getting designs for proper mechanical boiler design. Mr. Hutton would be able to speak a little bit more to the actual issues that are occurring with our boilers.
Yes, if you recall, we had an issue with one of the boilers late in 2019. We did a repair on the boiler, but it is the 3 boilers in the pool are reaching the end of their expected life cycle. The complexity of replacing them is hard to explain or visualize in a slide, but the boilers, the 3 of them interact between the 3 to produce domestic hot water, the proper heating levels for the different pools, make up air, preheating and heating for the air systems. So rather than just plowing ahead and saying we need to replace the boilers, we'd like to engage a consultant to do an assessment, make some recommendations. Hopefully we can find some efficiencies. And we also are restricted in our footprint to use in that mechanical room. So we're asking for $40,000 to begin the replacement process of the boilers and give us some time to plan and look at options that are out there.
Main pool basin refinished. Now this is one that I estimated higher than I usually do. This is a replacement of the pool basin finish, which usually occurs every 5 to 7 years. We're going to be on 7 years next year. And as you can see from the photo, the sealant, the paint is chipping off. Now that starts to chip off. Once it starts to chip off, it's definitely a health and safety hazard. Feet can get cut on those particular pieces of paint and chipping. The health inspector also wants those taken care of as soon as possible. So these are things that, or this one particular item is something that may not be able to wait for the structure review in order to keep the pool operating, and may need to occur and have a shutdown in order to do the main pool basin. Sump pump replacement. So the sump pump presently does not keep up to the backwashes. So when a backwash occurs on the filter system, the sump pump cannot keep up to the amount of water that is coming out, which floods the basement of the main mechanical room. Then we go on to the main mechanical room air supply, and I will let Mr. Hutton speak to that one.
Again, thank you, Ms. McNabb. This is one that came late to the table in the budgeting process. Natasha, maybe you can speak to where this costing sits. I don't believe it's built into the budget right now. Natasha, can you clarify that for me?
Yes, you're correct. So the information that Mr. Hutton received was different from the estimate that he had given me. So he received this information just a week ago. On the capital budget itself, it says 25,000. And the report came in much worse than anticipated. So this is now 250,000, and we would have to look at probably readjusting debenture amount, which was a lot of work to do last minute, and figuring out new debenture schedules, placing them into the operating budget and whatnot. So that's why Mr. Hutton brings this to the table, because we would have to talk about this a little bit more going forward. And Mr. Hutton can talk more about what the findings were, I believe.
Yeah, thank you, Natasha. Yes, certainly. So the main mechanical room in the pool has always been a very hot, humid, excessively hot and humid workspace. We were unable to ascertain exactly why, other than the fact that we are creating a very large number of BTUs in that room, but it wasn't, the current ventilation system was not keeping up to make it a safe, comfortable workspace. We brought in an engineering consultant to look at the air supply in the room, and we were shocked to find out that we don't have enough air supply to account for the gas-fired appliances in the room, let alone to give us any airflow, air turnover to make it a pleasant place to be. I had put a placeholder of 25,000 in the budget for this, not anticipating the severe level of deficiency that we had identified. But that is where the consultant came in with their pricing. It was just under that. We allowed for a little bit extra to tie into our building management system and any for unforeseen circumstances. But that is the unfortunate news that we got last week. I guess the only other comment I would make is that does tie into the facility assessment, the structure assessment that we are hopefully going to proceed with this year. Looks like I'm going to be asked to keep going. Similar to the conditions we have in the mechanical room at the activity center, we also have the same situation in the mechanical room at the pool. We have a lot of penetrations through the drywall. Again, this room is supposed to be a secure fire separation to not allow heat, gases, smoke, etc. to penetrate through. You can definitely see the picture with the pipes. There's definitely no sealant around those pipes, and that's free into the men's change rooms. You can also see a cutout in the ceiling on the other photo. These are just two of probably a couple dozen areas where we would need to put some fire stopping in. This one, again, has been ordered by a building codes inspector. It's not something we can ignore. We're going to proceed with this work. We just can't get around it. And finally, well, maybe finally, the exterior finish on the aquatic center. You can see the pink rock product that's on there. I think it's just a pink granite, but the mortar it's embedded in is asbestos containing. You can see just below the window there, there's a gray area. That area has been, we had the loose product, the loose stone and mortar removed and a parging patch put in place. This stone and masonry product wraps the whole facility. It is starting to delaminate in many other locations. We've made good with what we can right now, but the proper thing to do is to remove all that exterior finish and replace it with a better, safer product. Just keeps going, doesn't it? Okay, a valve exercise program. This is something I want to roll out across the whole organization. Is within our facilities, we've been unwilling or unable to exercise all our valves. The pictures you're looking at here are both from the pool main mechanical room and give you a typical indication of what some of the valves look like and why. I hope you can appreciate why we have been so hesitant to try these valves. The potential for operating them, we may get a failure, partial open, partial closed, or fully open at any point in time, or a catastrophic failure that leads to an uncontrollable leak. These valve exercising needs to happen during shutdown or planned outages. And we put a $15,000 cost on this for this year, but it will be going forward. As soon as we start exercising these, we know some of them are going to fail and we're going to need to replace them, and we need those capital dollars there to back up the actions we want to take. This is definitely something asset management would be promoting. It's going to be a bit of a daunting process, and we're going to have to hit the problem areas first and then work our way through our different facilities over a number of years. I believe that is my last slide. Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. There was just one thing that was missed on the last slide, but I can speak to that one. There was a capital project manager contract for $60,000. And that was something Mr. Furcho had added last year to make sure that we had proper project management through the process, and not having just somebody working off the corner of their desk to try and get these projects finalized and going. So this was also put in again this year. And that's it. If there's any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them if I can.
Well, thank you, Mrs. McNabb. Can I get you or whoever is sharing the screen there? Thank you. All right, again, thank you, and Mr. Hutton for that report. Alarming though it may have been on occasion. Questions from councillors? Councillor Journeau.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your presentation, Mrs. McNabb and Mr. Hutton. The list is a bit lengthy and a bit alarming in some points, especially when you're showing us those valves. So I guess we're going to have to prioritize some of these items, but the way you described them, they all seem to be needed to be done now. So I'm not sure how council is going to deal with that. But I do have a question on a prior expenditure. You mentioned the boilers in the aquatic center, and you said that you had a problem with one of the boilers a couple of years ago. I would like you to tell us like what happened, what progressed there. And you're referring, now we have problems with the boilers then. If I recall, we were supposed to replace 2 boilers in the aquatic center at that time. Can you please provide some explanation on that, please? Thanks.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, through to Councillor Journeau. In 2019, we had a heat exchanger in one of the boilers fail. It was leaking glycol into the combustion chamber. We shut it down. We came with a couple different options at that time. One was to replace both boilers. One was to repair the one boiler. My recommendation was to repair the one that had failed as a stopgap measure to carry us through to the point where we are today, where we could propose a redesign of the boiler system rather than just replacing in haste. So that was a $50,000 expenditure to replace that one heat exchanger. And that's the basic summary.
Can I have a follow-up, please?
Yes, please go ahead.
I will go back to the minutes, but I remember that there was a emergency request to replace 2 boilers as opposed to replacing coils. So I'm not quite, your answer seems to differ than the plan that I recall from 2019. But I will go back to the minutes to ascertain that. Because I'm a little disappointed to see this boiler thing coming back again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Journeau and Mr. Hutton. Other questions from councillors? Councillor Butler.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Mrs. McNabb, for your detailed report. I echo Councillor Journeau's comments on the capital side. It is somewhat alarming. We're going to have to wade through that and set priorities. I have a question or a couple of questions around revenues and incomes in the Culture and Recreation Department. Earlier on tonight, Mrs. Malinchuk reported, I think I wrote it down at the time, that we were anticipating a shortage of $125,000 or a decrease in $125,000 to culture and rec revenues. When I look at the culture and recreation revenue projections on page, I show this as page 20. I see a difference between approximately 1.3 million in 2019 in revenues and 996,000 in 2021. That is a decrease of $265,000. So that's not $125,000. And I have to wonder at some of the income projections that I see there proposed for 2021. For example, you're projecting $129,000 in income for the activity center, well over what we, I think, expected in 2019. And I'm wondering how we can possibly be expecting higher incomes for 2021, given the COVID situation. I would say the same thing about sports camps, where you have shown a decrease, but you are still showing $120,000 in sports camps. And your arena projections are considerably higher for 2021, or somewhat higher for 2021 than they were in 2019. So I guess my question overall is, are we being realistic in this budget in respect of our revenue income expectations in the Culture and Recreation Department? Because I'm concerned we rely a great deal on those revenues to help us with our budget. And if our revenue expectations are overstated, then you know, things might not come out as expected. So I'd just like your comments generally on revenues in your department and your expectations for 2021.
Your Worship.
Oh, go ahead, Ms.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Butler. I'm willing to put a little bit more work into how we present and how the numbers have come about and how we're putting it out. We're trying to summarize and be as
Sure.
well as possible. So if more detail would like to be done in this area, and then that's no problem. We can do that work and show council a little bit more deeper into that area, because we had already knew that we might have to look at the service levels. And that's why we had those sheets available, and we might have to look at it a bit more in a deeper sense if you're inquiring more about the revenue and expenses and the ins and outs of things, because there's many factors within this. And in this presentation, we're definitely trying to summarize it so that it can be as easily understood as possible. So we can do that work.
Thank you. I appreciate that, though I'm not sure that I am asking for more work. I guess if I could boil down what was maybe a long-winded question a little bit, Mrs. Malinchuk, you referenced, as I said, an expected $125,000 decrease in culture and recreation revenues. And I guess my immediate reaction is that the expected decrease must be much more than that over 2019. And so I would just like to understand what the actual expected decrease in income would be, or if it truly is 125, then I guess, yes, a little more background on that. I certainly do not want to ask for a lot more detail, just a clear understanding of somewhat contradictory numbers that I'm seeing here between $125,000 negative versus $265,000 negative.
Right.
And
I understand your worship, Butler. I definitely feel that looking at it a little bit deeper might help. It's okay, because we're looking at the net. I'm saying what the net impact is due to COVID, not just what the revenue decreases and what the expense decreases, what the net impact is what we're looking at.
Oh, well, that alone helps. Okay.
Yeah.
But still, perhaps it would be helpful if you were able to provide us in some manner without going to, you know, too terribly much work, just what that looks like.
Definitely, I understand where you're coming from, and it's just a little bit more detailed, but it's all there. I know
Okay.
where it is. It just I have to put it into a format that is understood. So yeah.
Sure. Thank you very much. And then, Your Worship, I have one other question, or I don't know if somebody else is waiting.
I see no hands, so go ahead.
Thank you. Mrs. McNabb, you presented early on in your presentation a list with a number of requests totaling $188,000, and I'm a little confused as to what those requests are. I don't see those numbers in the budget documents that we have. So I wondered if you could, I don't know if it's possible to bring that slide back up, or just help me to understand what are those 180, what are the requests within that $188,000, and how does that fit into the budget documents that we have in front of us?
Let's see if we can bring that slide up, because I'm not finding it on my slides. So I'm trying to see which one you were looking at. Oh, okay. So that was slide 7 that I have of my numbers. Natasha, that was Ms. Malinchak, that was on the budget service level request.
Yes, if I can just go in and reshare my screen. Just one moment, please. Bear with me.
And I can go through that, Mrs. Malinchak.
Or
Okay.
I can switch, yeah. Can everybody see my screen now?
I can,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay, so the biggest part of this increase is, as Mrs. McNabb explained, is a reallocation of maintenance costs. And you have not seen that portion of the budget come through. It'll be presented on Wednesday evening by operations. And it's service level request in additional staff needed going forward into the new year. So some of this is, there's 20,000 that's for contracted services. And then an additional 75,000 for ideal reallocation of reserves back to reserves. But ultimately, a lot of it is for the reallocation of maintenance costs that you'll see on Wednesday night. And this is above and beyond the initial number that we were speaking to of 2019 plus non-discretionary. So this is the above and beyond what directors believe they need to provide the services to the community. So it was option number 2 that was still being questioned somewhat about and wanting information from council, or council wanted information from administration, sorry.
All right, so thank you. This is additional request over and above, which in your view would need additional dollars over and above the tax envelope or the tax requisition that we have identified tentatively, though not yet agreed to.
Correct. There was the figures that were presented, and so we're showing it as the initial highlights, and that is the figure that we are discussing, that council wanted to discuss, 2019 plus non-discretionary. And then there's service levels that were above and beyond, and council did have some questions surrounding it. So we still included it so that the information was there and it wasn't lost in translation.
All right, so the reason I can't see it in the budget documentation in front of it is that it's not actually included in that because it would be over and above.
Correct.
Thank you. That answers my questions. Thank you. Thank you again, Mrs. McNabb.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Other questions from councillors? Mrs. McNabb, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Councillor McGrath.
I just felt like I should raise my hand and say something because I've been so quiet this whole presentation. So I don't have any questions and I don't have any comments. I would just like to thank administration for all of the work that they put into this presentation. We will have plenty of time to debate each individual request, and I really appreciate all of the work put into this evening. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. Mrs. McNabb, oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Demote, I couldn't see your hand.
Yeah, I was just going off of the feedback that Councillor Butler got on the reallocation. Am I to assume that with that reallocation, when we see the deficit in culture and rec, that we will see we'll see a credit in operations for a certain amount? So I guess that would be through the mayor to Ms. Malinchak.
Your worship, through to Councillor Demote. Yes, you'll see more information on that coming on Wednesday. It's above and beyond what we initially talked about. However, it was still, we still had it presented as, you know, what administration believes needs to still conduct these services going ahead.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Malinchak, to you or through you to Mrs. McNabb, I appreciate that developing a budget is about making a number of assumptions. So the assumption that I see, the projection for revenue is down $295,000 as compared to 2019. Expenses are also down slightly, about 32,000. So an increase to the net tax supported portion of the envelope by 263,000. But regardless of the absolute accuracy of those projections, based on the assumptions that have been made, what assumption or expectation is made with respect to service levels? That is, with that projected revenue and expenditure, what service levels can the public expect to see from the Culture and Recreation Department in terms of what they would have seen in 2019?
Mayor Ireland, what we are anticipating is opening the doors to the Fitness and Aquatic Center with regular hours, the 2019 hours. So effective January 2021, we would like to extend the hours and open the facilities to the same hours that we were operating in 2019. With regards to the activity center would be the same, and the arena would also be the same. The arena will obviously be pending bookings and Alberta health regulations for the first little bit, but hopefully those are all going to be overcome in a short period of time.
All right, thank you very much. So you've proposed a budget that would allow us to achieve those service levels, but subject, of course, to any direction that we get from the province or Alberta Health Services.
That's right. And presently the Fitness and Aquatic Center, the fitness center bookings, we're absolutely full. We have 3 time slots where drop-ins usually can attend, and no one has been able to actually drop in because the facilities are booked solid with the 1 hour booking time slots. We've had numerous requests come in to extend our hours and allow people to be able to do workouts for 1.5 hours. So that's why we're looking at opening the facility back up to regular hours, even if we have to book time slots.
All right, thank you very much for that. Appreciated. I see no other hands. We are now about 15 minutes overtime, but certainly permissible. So I want to thank all of staff who were engaged, those who presented, and those in the background that we didn't necessarily see who make all of this Zoom technology possible and available to us and our public. I want to thank all of the public members who attended throughout the evening. I invite you again to ask all of the questions that you have. Send those by email to info@town.jasper.ab.ca. You have until late Sunday night to do that, and you'll be able to watch again these proceedings on our YouTube channel at your leisure. And join us again on Wednesday night when we'll go through the remaining 2 department reports. And subject to closing remarks from you, Mrs. Malinchuk, I bid you all a good evening and thank you for attending.
Good evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you to staff.
Councillor
and
Journeau, are you just waving goodbye? Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
All right, good night, everyone.
Night, everybody.